Welcome to This Explainer. Look, today we're not just going to sit here and recite some dusty old biography. Instead, we're going to reverse engineer the actual operating system of one of history's absolute greatest minds, Nikola Tesla. We're going to break down exactly what shaped him, why his brain functioned so radically differently from his peers, and how he somehow managed to envision a world that literally wouldn't exist for another century.
To really grasp the sheer magnitude of his vision, I want you to just imagine walking through New York City in the late 1800s. Picture this stark contrast, right? You're standing on these dimly lit streets, horses are pulling carriages over cobblestones, and the whole concept of electricity, it's completely unreliable. I mean, most people are still vigorously arguing over whether electric power is even a practical idea at all. And yet, right in the middle of this primitive technological landscape, there's this one guy calmly predicting that one day, electricity is going to travel across continents. He's boldly stating that machines will work without wires that will communicate instantly across the globe, and that energy itself could actually become freely available to everyone. At the time, people laughed at him. They called him a dreamer. But history, of course, would eventually call him Nikola Tesla.
Okay, so let's dive right into this. The really fascinating question we have to ask ourselves here is, was Tesla just born with some kind of magical brain? Was his intellect just an unattainable genetic lottery ticket? Or did he actively cultivate a specific way of thinking that let him see decades into the future? Well, we're going to explore whether ordinary people like us can learn to think a bit more like him. Because actually, maybe genius isn't just magic. Maybe it's simply the daily practice of seeing reality differently. So here's our roadmap to decode his genius today. 1. The genius who saw tomorrow. 2. Prototyping in the mind. 3. First principles and focus. 4. The war of currents. 5. The flaw in the machine. And 6. How to think like Tesla. All right, section 1, the genius who saw tomorrow, the making of a mind. So, Nikola Tesla was born on July 10th, 1856, in the village of Smiljan, which was part of the Austrian Empire back then. Fun fact, his father actually wanted him to become a priest, which, wow, certainly would have been a very different path for humanity, right? But it was actually his mother who sparked something vital in him. She'd never received a formal education, yet she was constantly inventing new household tools just to make her daily chores easier. Tesla later credited his own inventive abilities largely to her. And I think this proves something essential right out of the gate. Genius often begins not with some incredibly expensive, prestigious education, but with intense, practical curiosity. Moving on to section 2, prototyping in the mind, advanced visualization. Now, as a child, when someone spoke a word, an entire vividly moving picture would just flash inside Tesla's mind. At first, this was completely overwhelming for him, but eventually, he learned to control it. Instead of drawing his inventions out on paper, he built them entirely inside his imagination. Every single screw, every wire, every movement, every possible mistake, he mentally tested these machines before he ever physically built them. I mean, most of us need physical prototypes to see if something's going to work, right? Tesla built prototypes inside his brain. Just think about how extraordinary that is for a second. While most of us use our brain's visualization to, replay awkward social moments from 5 years ago before we fall asleep, Tesla was mentally designing complex power plants. It's the exact same human brain, but a radically different way of using it. Today, modern neuroscience calls this advanced visualization. Elite athletes use it, chess grandmasters use it, but Tesla, he completely mastered it over a century ago. Which brings us to section 3, first principles and focus, solving tomorrow's issues. So the really crucial point here is that Tesla utilized what we now call first principles thinking. See, most people solve today's problems. Tesla solved tomorrow's. While other inventors were bickering over how to make a slightly better, longer-lasting candle, Tesla was literally imagining electrifying the entire planet. He bypassed conventional limits by just straight-up refusing to think inside existing systems. Instead of asking, hey, how do we improve what's already here? He asked, what does nature actually allow? He shared this trait with ancient philosophers, like Aristotle looking for root causes or Da Vinci studying nature instead of just copying other artists. Tesla asked the impossible questions.
What is electricity? What if information travels wirelessly? What if the Earth itself conducts energy? Great innovators ask impossible questions. Average thinkers ask the safe ones.
But how exactly did he fuel that intense level of thinking? Well, he relied on obsessive focus and what psychologists today call deep work. He loved solitude and fiercely protected his deep thinking time. Think about today, where our attention is just constantly under attack by notifications, algorithms, messages, you name it. Imagine trying to boil a pot of water. If someone interrupts you and takes that pot off the stove every 30 seconds, which, by the way, is exactly how our modern attention spans operate, the water is simply never going to boil. Tesla, on the other hand, kept his pot on the fire for hours, days, and sometimes even years. Neuroscience actually shows that this kind of uninterrupted concentration strengthens the neural pathways responsible for learning and creativity. Basically, great ideas simply require uninterrupted heat. All right, Section 4, the War of Currents, Edison versus Tesla. So Thomas Edison was ruthlessly promoting direct current, or DC power. Tesla, however, believed alternating current, AC power, was vastly superior, and this debate became brutal. Tesla actually briefly worked for Edison. According to Tesla, he was promised this massive bonus for improving Edison's generators. But when the work was done, the promise was reportedly dismissed as just a practical joke. Whether he remembered that perfectly accurately or not, that betrayal stung. But instead of giving up his vision, Tesla just resigned. It's absolutely astounding to think about, really. This genius, literally one of history's greatest inventors, was forced to dig ditches doing grueling manual labor just to survive, all because no one believed in his vision. It goes to show that life will sometimes aggressively test your vision before rewarding it. But eventually, the industrialist George Westinghouse recognized the sheer brilliance of Tesla's ideas. Together, they established AC as the dominant electrical system because it could transmit electricity efficiently over incredibly long distances. And today, nearly every single electrical grid on Earth depends on that exact principle. This proves a vital lesson for us. Truth doesn't become false just because people reject it. Reality eventually reveals what actually works. Let's look at Section 5, the flaw in the machine, unusual habits and business. Now, Tesla exhibited some highly unusual habits and obsessive routines. He walked incredibly long distances daily, carefully observed patterns, compulsively counted his steps, had this intense dislike for pearls, of all things, and adhered to incredibly strict routines. Some historians believe he displayed traits that today might look a lot like obsessive-compulsive tendencies. But, rather than mocking these quirks, we should recognize that extraordinary mental strengths very often come side by side with rigid characteristics. His intense perfectionism is exactly what allowed him to imagine flawless machines. But that same rigidity also completely stalled many of his projects. Discipline creates excellence, for sure, but extreme rigidity can create suffering.
And these traits directly led to his biggest weakness. While he was an absolute master of science, he was, quite frankly, terrible at business. He cared way more about the invention itself than he did about the wealth it brought. He was constantly reinvesting everything he had into impossible dreams, which ultimately led to some pretty severe financial struggles. Meanwhile, his competitors were gaining immense wealth and public recognition. And this teaches us a pretty sobering reality. Innovation alone just isn't enough. Vision desperately needs execution. The world doesn't just reward intelligence. It rewards the ability to translate that intelligence into a tangible, practical reality.
Finally, Section 6, How to Think Like Tesla, Modern Science of Genius. Modern psychology consistently finds that exceptional achievement is rarely explained by IQ alone. It's much more about curiosity, intrinsic motivation, and sheer persistence. So based on that, here is your actionable toolkit, 7 proven principles derived directly from Tesla's life. Number 1, stay endlessly curious and try to ask better questions than everyone else around you. Number 2, train your imagination. Practice visualizing solutions deeply before taking physical action. Number 3, think from first principles. Examine what nature actually allows, not just what tradition dictates.
Number 4, protect your attention. Remember that deep focus creates deep ideas. Number 5, accept temporary misunderstanding. You really have to know that new ideas arrive long before public approval does. Number 6, keep learning across different disciplines because real innovation usually happens right at the intersection of different fields. And number 7, build for humanity, not just yourself. The greatest inventions always improve civilization as a whole.
As we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to reflect on these incredibly powerful words from Tesla. The present is theirs. The future, for which I really worked, is mine. Over a century later, his seemingly impossible future truly became the present we are living in right now. He pursued mastery rather than applause, and his curiosity was his ultimate fuel. And so, I leave you with this final provocative thought to challenge your own mental operating system as you go about your day. Because the next great breakthrough might not begin in some multi-billion-dollar laboratory. It might begin inside a curious mind. So what impossible question will you ask today?